Thiek high, fix carditahun, word count, climax placement, ending, or woe ek dialogue line sab thiek kark puri story, dobara lik rahahun. The sword didn't weigh any different than it had on graduation day, but my arm didn't believe that anymore. Somewhere behind me, 40 seconds of telemetry was the entire life expectancy of the last crew who'd come this close, and I was about to beat that number or not. That's getting ahead of things. Let me start where it actually started, 3 months earlier, with a three-eyed instructor laughing so hard his translator gave up. I was the only human in a room full of species who'd been slicing each other apart with focused energy since before my ancestors worked out how to smelt iron. Velcroth ran that combat course like a man who'd never lost, because he hadn't, not in 4 centuries. When I walked into the arena carrying 80 centimeters of plain, forged steel instead of a plasma edge, he didn't get angry. He got delighted, the way you get delighted watching someone else's mistake. You had your pick of every weapon this Federation has built, he said, and you chose scrap metal. Nobody said it had to glow, I told him. He didn't like that answer, so he cut a support beam in half to make his point for him, steel just like mine, gone in under a second, the ends still dripping orange when it hit the floor. Then he asked me, straight out, whether I still thought I could stop his blade with mine. I told him no, and then I told him that stopping it was never the plan. That's the part he couldn't get past, not the sword. The fact that I'd already conceded the thing he thought was the whole argument, and I still wasn't backing down. We fought 3 points, first to land wins. I won't pretend the first exchange was pretty. I ducked inside his reach doing something no Federation manual has a name for, and my blade found his chest before he'd finished resetting his stance. He called it luck, called it an anomaly. I let him. The second point, he stopped teaching and started actually trying to hurt me. And I understood then that everyone in that observation gallery was watching to see whether the anomaly would repeat. It did. I read the 7% lean he favored on his right side, the half-second hitch before he committed to a full swing, and I used both, and my blade tagged his side, plating hard enough to make him stumble. How, he said, not a question, a demand. You're not as unpredictable as 400 years should make you, I said. You favor a side. You hesitate before the big swing. I had that figured out before we started. You gave it to me free while you were busy melting a beam to scare me. The third point is the one they still talk about at the academy. He came at me with everything, every angle his physiology could produce, and I let his plasma blade meet mine at an angle instead of trying to block it dead on. Let it run down the steel instead of through it, sacrificing 3 centimeters of edge to buy myself the half-second his weapon was committed, and his guard wasn't. I put the tip of my sword against his throat plating before he'd finished recovering. The gallery didn't make a sound for a good 3 seconds. Afterward, he handed me back my ruined blade and told me 2 things I didn't expect. First, that I'd passed with the highest marks he'd given in years. Second, that ships had been disappearing on the outer rim for 8 months, found intact, crews simply gone, like something had peeled them out of the universe and left the furniture behind, and that whatever was doing it didn't care about anyone's superior technology. He wanted me on the frontier. He wanted me learning to be desperate again, before desperation found us first. 6 hours later, I was on a transport that handled turbulence like a drunk man on ice skates, sitting across from a zero-gravity specialist named Eric Voss, and a Velk warrior named Nixara who sharpened claws that were already sharper than anything in my kit. Outpost Kayan met us with live weapons fire that Commander Shen assured us, with a completely straight face, was probably a drill. It wasn't. 47 ships gone in that sector by then. 16 recovered, every one of them empty and running fine, one galley meal found still warm with no one left to eat it. And 2 days before we arrived, something 15 kilometers wide had appeared in that same stretch of space without a single sensor catching it arrive. 3 probes lost. A 4th came back turned inside out. A crude 5th sent 40 seconds of picture before it stopped sending anything. Then it spoke. 17 languages at once, 3 of them nobody in the Federation had ever catalogued, saying the same 4 words, Come alone, come armed. They sent 12 of us instead. Which brings me back to that deck, that countdown, my sword suddenly heavier in my hand than 80 centimeters of steel had any right to be. Inside, gravity was a rumor. The walls bent in directions my eyes refused to process. And floating in that impossible space were the missing, hundreds of them, maybe more, suspended in something that wasn't sleep and wasn't death. A shape made of light and absence introduced itself as a curator, a preserver of moments too precious to let end. It told us it had given these people forever, endless time to sit with whatever questions had carried them out here in the first place. They didn't ask for forever, I said. They asked for the unknown, it answered, its voice arriving from every direction at once. I gave them eternity to understand it. Then give it back, I said. Nobody signs up for eternity by accident. It laughed, and the sound felt like something tearing very slowly. Steel, it said, against the space between spaces. You are amusing, little warrior. I get that a lot, I said, and I swung. Nothing should have happened. A blade forged in an ordinary furnace by an old smith who'd refused to explain his own work had no business touching something operating outside normal physics. But whatever Grimm had layered into that reforged edge held true here the way it hadn't anywhere else. The field around the nearest prisoner cracked like ice underfoot, and a woman who'd been frozen mid-breath for who knows how long gasped and fell into Nixara's arms, fully, suddenly alive. The curator's calm didn't survive that. You don't understand what you're unmaking, it said, and the chamber itself began to fold and twist, trying to do to us what it had done to everyone floating inside it. Walls that shouldn't have existed pressed in like they meant to swallow the deck whole. We didn't stop. Eric moved through the wrong gravity like it was the only gravity he'd ever known. Dr. Whistler called out which direction the walls would bend before they bent there. Nixara simply refused to be caught, and somehow that refusal worked. And I kept swinging, kept cracking cages open one at a time, my arm burning, my breath ragged, until the missing weren't missing anymore, just shaking, blinking, breathing on their own for the first time in months or years, or, for some of them, centuries. This was the part that mattered most, the part I'd carry longer than the fight itself, not the swordplay. This, watching strangers remember how to be afraid, which meant remembering how to be alive. Why? The curator asked, and for the first time it sounded less like a god and more like something that had lost an argument it was certain it would win. Fight for strangers who are not even your own kind. I lowered the blade for just a second, enough to answer honestly instead of quickly. Because letting something fade out slowly is still letting it die, I said. We'd rather burn out on our own terms than exist forever on someone else's. It didn't answer that. Maybe there wasn't an answer. The chamber kept unraveling around us, faster now, and Jules's voice cut through on comms telling us the ship wouldn't hold position much longer. We made it back to the Whisper with seconds to spare, dragging the last of the freed with us, watching through the rear port as that 15-kilometer impossibility folded itself down to nothing and took its silence with it. Behind us, 47 ships lit their engines again, one after another, crews stumbling back into lives they'd never expected to see twice. The debrief on Cayenne ran 6 hours and needed 4 different translators before anyone agreed on what to call what we'd seen. Commander Shen sat through all of it without writing a single note, which worried me more than if she had. Afterward, she found me on the observation deck, staring at stars that finally looked ordinary again. She didn't ask for a report. She looked at the sword, at the new scars along its edge where it had cut through something that wasn't supposed to be cuttable, and asked what I planned to do with it now. Federation Council wants you personally, she said. They're calling it revolutionary, the idea that something this old could touch something that advanced and win. That's going to unsettle a lot of very comfortable assumptions. It's just a sword, I said. Nothing you carry that far is ever just anything, she said. It's what you're willing to do with it that decides that. She told me what came next, instructor work, teaching other species what desperation actually felt like, because peace had made the whole Federation forget. I told her I wasn't ready to teach anything yet. I still had more to learn out here, more impossible things worth going hungry and desperate for. She left me alone with the stars and the blade. I turned it over once under the light, watching the new marks catch and hold, and understood I still hadn't decided whether it was a weapon or a promise. Only that I wasn't setting it down. Not today, maybe not ever.